All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and call our budget meeting to order. Just so everyone knows, we've got two budget meetings scheduled today. We have our regularly scheduled at 3. This meeting will be for the purposes of beginning to adjust, allocate, cut requests, things like that in our first draft of our budget. So we'll go ahead and call the roll for our first budget meeting.
Danny Elvis.
Papers on the drive, he's there.
So it is. Nancy Barker. Here. John Gibson.
Here.
Joshua Gill. Here. Tom Kern.
Here.
Robbie Palmer.
Here.
And Jason Roach.
Here.
We have 7 members present, constituting a quorum. We also have Civil Von Trent, the only other commissioner.
I'd like to welcome everyone today. We have a lot in front of us in terms of adjusting budget, preparing the final document, and of course we've got a pretty large agenda for the budget meeting, so I'm going to try to keep it rolling as much as I can, so just bear with me. Before we get started though, I wanted to go over where our fund balance has been floating since 2019-2020. So I went backwards and pulled the actual numbers for our fund balance. I don't have a presentation for you or a slide or anything, but if you want to write these numbers down, you can. And once again, everything is actual except for the 23-24. It's estimated, and we won't have that actual back until around August. In 2019-2020, we ended with an actual fund balance of $7,268,939. 2019-2020. That's $7,268,939. In 2021, we ended with a fund balance of $7,956,700. $7,956,762. 7956762. In 21-22, we ended with a fund balance of $10,997,753. $10,997,753. In 22-23, we ended with a fund balance of $10,330,668. That's $10,330,668. 22-23. Finally, in 23-24, this is projected. We don't have the actual. And by the way, this number accounts for the $1.5 million that's allocated for the Goshen Valley Bridge. It's already been pulled out. Correct, Eric?
Yes.
The number is $10,794,296. That's $10,794,296. Eric, is it 20% of our expenditures in General Fund 101 that we have to have the fund balance at? Is that the limit?
That's the recommendation for all funds.
Okay, so 20%. So 20% of our expenditures, give or take, is somewhere between $4 and $5 million. Is that about right?
Bear with me just a moment. I'll say that one more time.
20% of our total expenditures in General Fund 101 would be somewhere between $4 and $5 million.
Yes. Agreed.
Okay, so our estimated fund balance, this is what I need you guys to see. Our estimated fund balance with the bridge taken out, we're sitting really close to 40% of our expenditures. Our fund balance has done pretty well. As you can see, in 2019-2020, we were at $7.2 million, and now, even with the $1.5 million being pulled out for the bridge, we're sitting at about 10.7. Now, we are pulling some every year from our fund balance, give or take a little bit. Like, for example, between 19-20 and 2021, we added $687,000 and some change. 21-22, we added $3 million, but then 22-23, we decreased by $667,000. 23-24, we added 611. No, that's not correct because I used the wrong number. We added around 600,000. We're projecting to lose a little bit this year, but when the actuals come back, we might not lose any because we're within a razor thin margin. Right now, I'm projecting we're within 70, 80,000. So I know I just threw a lot of numbers at you, but I say all that to say our fund balance has been doing pretty good. Actually, we've been managing fairly well. As we begin to cut and allocate in the budget, this is what I said this last year, and I hope I want to kind of continue on with this same theme. For right now we're projecting $122,254 that we add, that's a penny we have to find somewhere. Now you've got fund balance that you can use, but remember you don't want to use your fund balance for recurring expenditures, because over time you're going to chip away at that fund balance, and then that's when we get those knee-jerk reactions where we're having these tax increases. Secondly, you could, if you needed to, move pennies around within the allocation that we already have. But remember that we've got capital projects funds that we've set up to try to mitigate debt in the future. So you don't want to mess with any of those. We can. It's up to the committee. Whatever y'all want to do, it's up to the commission. So we can play with that. I say all that to say it's my hope, my goal, to mitigate a tax increase as much as possible, if not eliminate the need for one. We've got a lot of tough decisions to make coming on the back end of a fairly large tax increase last year. I feel like we can try to do the best that we can to keep that from happening again this year. And I know I've heard many of you say in the meeting that that's kind of your goal too. I will say, before we get started, I still stick to my original idea that I feel like in the future we need to look at these 2-3 cent property tax increases to keep up with inflation over time. My personal opinion, not speaking for the committee, is we had such a big increase last year. I don't want to go back to the taxpayer again this year. I just don't. But that's a committee decision, and we'll do the best that we can. So we've got a lot of needs in our budget, and we're going to have to be creative. Does anybody want to share any thoughts about anything that I just said? Some of you may disagree with me, some of you may not.
I'll just say I appreciate the committee. I know I haven't missed the hearings, but I have done my due diligence, get caught up with everything that's going on. I've reviewed all the documents, and I appreciate your comments, Mr. Chairman, and would agree with the sentiment that we don't need to return to ask the taxpayers for more, and I think that needs to be our goal, and I think it usually is, always, but I think that especially needs to be our goal as we think through any additions, and hopefully there's some things we can cut as well. But.
All right. Any other thoughts before we begin? Okay. We're going to begin with our contributions. We have requests for contributions in front of us, and as you remember, we passed a resolution to freeze all non-emergency services contributions, but we can at least look at our emergency services. And so I guess we'll begin with the Hawkins County Volunteers Firemen's Association. They're not asking for an increase. Bulls Gap's not asking for an increase. Carters Valley Volunteer Fire Department is asking for an increase of $25,000. So I guess we'll start there.
Can I ask a question just in general about fire departments? So on the cities that have paid fire services, I think that would be Rogersville, Churchill, and does Mount Carmel have a paid fire? They pay their firemen?
No, it's volunteer. There's one paid position.
Okay.
All the departments not paid.
So as we talked through the joint venture, Mayor, with the cities the other day, there were some in the audience that were quick to tell us that they weren't required to contribute because that was left to the county. My question is, why are we contributing to cities' fire departments?
That's what the commission's decided to do.
The argument that has been over the years is saying Hawkins County Fire Department.
Absolutely, and I guess I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek when I say it, but I think that county taxpayers could make the argument that they're being double taxed to pay for the city's fire departments, the same way that cities are saying their folks are going to be double taxed to pay for an EMS service if they participate in the joint venture. While we're not discussing the joint venture, I think it's pertinent to the committee today to ask, at what level we do want to fund city departments.
And are we sure that I'm not I know Wolf Jackson don't pay, and I don't think Rogersville does, I think they pay the fire chief. They don't pay.
Yeah. I was told that they were paid a nominal amount at one time, like, I can't remember, someone in the,
I think they do have a few paid members.
Maybe the chief.
I think one question you'll get back from the cities too is how many calls are we running on the city that are mutual aid calls for county calls?
Yeah.
And we start splitting that up, then now we're gonna take a working fire departments across the whole county and turn that into similar situation with EMS. And then there's the county agencies for Stanley Valley and, which one is, Carter Valley. A lot of the calls that we get in Mount Carmel are mutual aid calls. And those are ran for under mutual aids. There's no any type of reimbursement or anything like that for it. I'm not saying that we should. It's mutual aid. But that's another thing you did want to take into factor when you're considering that too.
Yeah, and I would just ask that the cities have that same consideration as we consider other ventures. Mr. Mayor, if you want to pass that along on my behalf, I don't get to speak to them. Because I agree with everything you just said. But I think it needs to be considered in all things emergency services, not just fire departments when it comes to the county giving them money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I got.
Mr. Chairman, as far as paying for the first response, $10,000 go to Carter Valley, Clinton Valley, Mount Carmel, and Stanley Valley.
That's the proposal, that's correct.
Correct. So what I would like to see, what if we, or put before the committee, if we pay a percentage? So Carter's Valley in 2024 had 326 calls for service. Only 18% of those calls for service were 58 medical calls. Clinton Valley had 56 calls for service, 6 were medical. Mount Carmel had 410, 258 were medical. Stanley Valley had 339 calls and only 91 were medical. So if we pay for a percentage, that puts everybody on the equal playing field of how much funding they get. But that also will decrease our expenditures from $40,000 if you add the $10,000 for all for Carter's, Clinton, Mount Carmel, and Stanley Valley. Based on the numbers of last year, of course we can't do 2025, we don't know what those numbers will be. It goes from $40,000 down to $26,000 expense. And that's capping it at $10,000. Once you reach, a percentage and you're over 10,000, then we already cap them at 10,000 now.
So, Clinch Valley, since you guys just got your EMR certification, what was the cost to send your folks to training?
The cost for the training was actually covered under a grant, and that's not quite the issue with the first responder program. We need vehicles, we need uniforms, we need medical supplies to get this program up and going. So that's kind of where our budget's coming from.
But you don't, because the first response, you already got the equipment and the uniform for your fire department.
That's not
So
the
you're
same.
putting on a different uniform for a first response?
I'm not wearing bumper gear to go to a medical call.
Okay, what are you wearing?
And we also are not taking a fire truck to go to a cardiac arrest.
So what vehicle are you taking to a medical call? And what
We have,
equipment are you taking with you?
We have a Crown Victoria that was donated from the sheriff's office. It needs paint, it needs stickers, it needs lights and sirens. It needs to have a radio installed in Knoxville. I mean, all this stuff has to happen.
So how long have you guys been first responder certified? How long have you been operating that way?
We have been certified since, February? And we have a go live date of May 1st. And we're trying to get everything ready, everything going.
So you were certified in February, but your official grand opening, I guess, is May 1st.
Correct.
So February, March, April, you've run 6 medical calls in those 3 months. Okay.
This is for 2024, this is from a 9.
Okay. So, and I think that's the struggle you have with trying to, I guess, prorate the responses, that some of them have been first responders longer than others have. So they've not really had the opportunity to make those calls yet. They've just not got certified.
But that still gives them room for, we give them, so we already give them $30,000. So you're taking out $3,300.
So, Mr. Palmer, I guess, let me clarify. Are you saying that in
Out of
this...
first response, not out of what the 30,000 they're already getting.
So are you saying out of this budget cycle that if they only run X amount of calls, they only get 7,000, for example? If they run enough to earn 9,000, they can get that 9,000 in this budget cycle?
Up to a cap of 10,000.
Okay, so I misunderstood. I thought you meant look at it retroactively and allocate based on what they've run already. You're saying, that's what I misunderstood.
Well, no, that is what I'm asking, because this is a 2024 call volume, and they ran 11% of their calls. Then this is just using Quinn Valley as an example. 11% of their calls were only medical. So, out of the $10,000,
They're not calling us for medical, because we were never,
We've missed 3 within the past week.
yeah, we've had 3 this week.
Those 6 calls would have been cardiac arrest.
Yeah, cardiac arrest, left assist.
we're going to have to, we go off numbers from the past all the time. That's why we.
Well, I think their point is that they wasn't offered this service last year, so it's hard to tell them from our else.
Correct.
Exactly.
Right. There's nothing to compare it to.
So you were suggesting to give them a flat number for this budget cycle based on the responses last year, is that what I'm getting right?
And then in the next year, we'll go up to 10,000 based on the percentage. You know, some people run 91, like down valley, 91 medical calls for 27% of our call volume. We're already giving them $30,000 to operate.
And I guess the only point I'd make about Stanley Valley is Stanley Valley was one of the first that we gave that $10,000 extra to, and so they were already EMR first responder certified, and the county requested that last year. They had a whole year. They had a whole year as a certified first responder to make those calls, whereas Clinch Valley didn't.
Well, you're trying to make it fair across the board.
I guess the question would be if Clinch Valley had been certified at the beginning of the budget year last year, would they have had the opportunity to run all those calls based on the certification?
You can't say this, you can't say that.
And the problem is next year, we don't know how many they're going to run.
But it's not make it fair across the board. When you go, you do the, take by percentage of their call volume, but we're already giving their donation to run a fire call. And then the extra percentage of medical calls, that's what we should be paying for.
And I see what you're saying. I guess it's hard for me to give them a percentage of the medical calls they ran last year because they weren't first responders last year, but they are now. So they're going to operate as a first responder in this budget cycle on funds that are allocated to them when they weren't first responders last year. I guess that's my income.
And we have greater startup fees because we were done exactly. Stanley Valley was, they already had.
We don't have existing equipment like that.
And I guess I'm using you guys because the other ones like Hawkins County Rescue Squad, you guys are just starting.
But with that being said, Mr. Chairman, they also get $31,000 more. And I've already talked to Rescue Squad about that, and they understand that they're already getting supplement because they are primary EMS backup. So they're already getting a supplement of what the fire department can get. Churchill and Hawkins County.
The 10,000 when that was proposed last year, it was just 1 year that was proposed previously.
Yes, we said we would revisit that on your way.
That was, my understanding at the time, was a supplement of supplies, not a supplement of setting up the EMR, or setting all with the cost of the vehicles and all of that. It was just a assistance with, you're doing this program already, we're helping you with the supplies that it takes to run it.
Right.
Not that we're, it seems like it's almost becoming a,
Fund the vehicle. And
yeah, it's becoming looking at it being a way to, incentivize the increase in donation of the service. And I completely agree, it's a service. But it was for that reason of why we offered, because you didn't need vehicles, you're using existing, and to alleviate some of the calls on the rescue squad and the murder that EMS. And I wouldn't say that we didn't even have to call it a permanent donation type deal. If we want to get rid of it completely just across the board, we can do that too. But the original goal of it was to aid in the supplies, if I recall correctly.
way of not getting rid of, not to get away from giving anybody a donation. It just making it even cross border, because the department may only run, take Quincy Valley out of it, so they have a full year. You're looking at 58 medical calls for Carter's Valley versus 91 for Stanley Valley. Well, Stanley Valley is using 9%. I mean, they're running more, 9% more medical calls based on their call volume. So this is just supplementing, we're paying for your percentage difference for medical calls. Which it could go up to 10%. Say Carter's Valley next year, or up, not 10%, but up to $10,000. Say Carter's Valley next year has $4,600 more than, or this year, then they get $10,000 next year.
I disagree with all that, Commissioner Paul. First of all, you gotta remember, these are volunteers. They get
I understand that. We're not taking away the funding from the general contribution.
And that's more paperwork on these volunteer fire departments. Somebody's going to have to do all that paperwork and submit it. I think the citizens of Hawkins County are getting their money's worth. And I think I might have been the one made the statement last year in supporting Stanley Valley on that additional $10,000, with the understanding that if the rest of the departments got their certification, that they would be entitled for it also.
And I'm saying that, what I'm saying, but we also said, Mr. Alvis, that the $10,000 is not guaranteed. And we're in a tight budget here, and this is a way to reduce a little bit of the cost, but still get them your funding for supply to run the medical response. I'm not saying you away with the program completely. The last thing I want to do is cut funding and it cuts the program. I agree with you that citizens of the county are getting their money's worth. Just looking to still give them money to reimburse their supplies and not cut the program. These numbers are straight from 911 on their call volume, and I'm waiting on numbers coming in from failed call response calls. And those numbers will be coming in too. So we're giving them the $30,000 for operating the volunteer fire department. The percentage extra, the $10,000 being for their medical response, and we're asking them to do extra.
So what is 100%? How many calls would they have to run to get the full 10,000?
Could be different based on their call volume.
So they would be set up, every location would have a different allocated value for a call. Is that right? Every location then would have a different, call.
So let's use, okay. It's getting away with weeds. Stanley Valley's at 27% of their call volume last year, medical calls at 91 calls, about 339.
So you allocate however many of the first responder funds based on the percentage of their total call volume.
A medical response. Yes.
So in order to get the 10,000, they would have to run every single call. Have to be medical.
No. It's just our medical response would have to meet whatever percentage that 10,000 comes out to.
Could we,
First of all, I want to thank you guys for everything you guys do and all the headaches you go through. Second of all, you sort of set a precedent and made the statement last year that if you start this, you're getting the $10,000. I agree up front, because the precedent's done been set, like Clinch Valley here, they should get their $10,000. That's me. That's a taxpayer. I also believe, sort of along the same lines that Robbie's saying, that from here after, if we're going to do it, you give that department a certain percentage based off their medical calls that they run, capped out at $10,000. So if their budget is $30,000 and 20% of their calls is medical, well, it's 20% of 30,000, right? So it does take a lot to get started. I know where they're coming from, just from the rescue squad standpoint, and we're different than the fire departments. we have 5 vehicles that are set up as first response. We did that based on what monies we have and maintained them right and everything else. I'll guarantee you, no other department has invested that much in, because their call volumes and their coverage area is not as big as ours. Last year, we did not ask for the $10,000 because we didn't get back into the program until after the budget year started. And we decided as an organization not to come in midstream and ask for 10. We just ate it, and this coming year, we'd ask for it. I can tell you, just off top of my head, expenses to outfit 5 vehicles, because we never know if we're going to be going to a wreck and then leave our going to a medical call and then to another medical call or whatever. We need all our vehicles to be able to do all. I'd say, just a guesstimation, to do 5 vehicles, we've got about $17,000, $18,000 in it. So I see where they're wanting their $10,000 to get started, but I see where Commissioner Palmer is trying to do it from here on out. It needs to be based off a percentage of the medical costs off your initial, that your funding that you get, if you wanted to get
Daniel
additional.
Valley and Church Hill got their initial 10,000 last year, so does that mean that we go ahead and put them on the percentage rate this year?
Yeah.
I believe so. And Plains Valley, since they're starting up, then give them their 10,000
And then let them do the percentage rate
after a
next
full
year.
year of operating under that program.
And you got to take in consideration the call volumes too, versus, say, and I hate to do this, pre-COVID, medical call request for volunteer agencies was at low. We also had higher volumes and more people working ambulance-wise and personnel-wise on EMS service, where now they don't. And they take like Clutch Valley, hard running priority 1 from the truck here in Rogersville, and that's if that truck is not on the call already, 18 to 20 minutes, where they can be there most of their coverage area in less than 10, especially when you start going into possible strokes, cardiac arrest, trauma bleeds, whatever. You have to take all that in consideration. The call volume has increased. Our call volume has increased on medical calls almost 200% since pre-COVID. Because first response, and these guys have seen it, lift assist. We get tons of those. And it's all because 2 people, and not trying to be mean, can't lift up somebody that's...
My size.
Mark said it, I didn't. And he can say that, and I can say I have responded to his house to get him up out of the floor. Right?
Yep.
So you have to take all that in consideration. And I agree with Commissioner Alves too, to these people in these communities where we give the funding to, they want to know that, hey, my tax dollars is paying for them to come help me get up out of the floor, come help do controlled bleeding, or come start CPR on me. I agree with him on that too.
So we would just need it written in the record that the next commission that comes in to work on the budget can remember who got the initial 10,000 and who's on the scale. I mean, because that's going to get lost in translation if we're not careful. Right now, we know only 2 received.
That or you'd have to do a resolution on it.
Mr. Chairman, to answer your question, so just using the Stanton Valley as an example. So 27% of our call volume last year was 91 calls. And that would be $8,100. To get to 30%, which would be the 10,000, would be 102 calls.
So then we're going to change the precedent just a little and say it's a $10,000 allocation for startup fee and then a percentage of your calls every year after.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
I apologize for not being able to talk. I want to know exactly how it was left last year. We're saying we set a precedence. Did we say we will do this for the fire departments from here on out? Or did we not?
No, so when we did it last year, we said that we would work on a year-by-year basis and we would review it every year. And so, as far as getting them into the program, I believe we encourage them to do that because it gives us more medical response out in the community when the EMS can't get there as quickly. But no, ma'am, it wasn't guaranteed year by year. So this is my opinion, but we do what we did last year for those two agencies. For the others that earn that certification, or we cut it completely and nobody gets it. Now, if we wanted to do a $10,000 allocation because they went to training, they need the equipment to start the program, because we did that for Stanley Valley and Churchill Rescue Squad last year, I'm okay with that, as long as we say, from this point on, you're gonna work on a percentage. I think that's fair. But, yes, ma'am.
And that's what I was saying, so, and this is excluding the rescue squad because they are the primary response backup to EMS, is that correct, Jeff?
Yes, up in that end of the county, and Hawkins County is on this end of the
And
county.
they're already getting a supplement for that purpose right there, so, this would just be the fire departments. I'm fine with doing the 10,000 startup, and then pay every year after that as long as they maintain the qualification to be first response.
Do you want to go ahead and put that in the form of a motion? I think
Yes,
we
sir.
talked it out, so that way we can go ahead and vote on it.
Yes.
So you might want to state that so
I'll
much.
let you.
I'll just ask one question. How many people are we going to fire to be certified?
At EMS, I don't think any of them's
I
here.
believe it's 3. I
If
think
you
you have
consider a
3.
first responder agency, you gotta have 3.
That's what we were told.
Wayne and Jason Morrell, I think they requested 3 and 2 response vehicles.
If I could just add to that, at what you're talking about there, presenting with a percentage, I have no doubt that even with that capped, based on what I'm seeing, how they call us out and dispatch us for any of that type of medical calls so far, I don't see us having a problem meeting that to get the full 10,000 next year, honestly. I'm just,
Well,
that
and
helps
that's like,
out.
that's E911, they page it out at a certain time, so whatever E911
Right.
numbers would be what.
So the record,
Right.
there's no bookkeeping required by them. The record will come from
Yeah,
911.
okay, this is a quick, Lynn, he gave me all the agencies, including Rescue Squad and Hazmat, the 2024 total calls for service, how many were fire and rescue related, how many were the percentage of the fire rescue, and then how many were medical related. So this will be a quick
So I
information
think
we
in
can
the
have.
resolution, what you're going to propose, I think we need to state that they have to keep 3 people certified.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. How long does it take me to get certified? How much time am I going to spend?
It depends on how much time you
Pardon?
have. It depends on how much time you have to dedicate. If you can go to class every day for 8 hours a day, you could probably do it in a month. It took us 4
3 or 4 months.
months after
Okay.
work, you know.
That answered my question, thank you.
And that's just the
Long
initial
time.
certification. You still have to do continuing education all year, so.
Thank you.
So
I'm sorry, we have a motion on the floor.
Not yet.
So the motion, I'll make a motion to allocate 10,000 for startup first response, and every year after that, be paid by percentage of call volume, maintaining the minimum requirement staff for the program. Does that make sense, Sarah?
I'll listen to it on the recording. I can't write that fast.
10,000 startup.
So they, so from what he's proposing, that means Stanley Valley and Churchill Rescue Squad would only receive a percentage of
Churchill will not. This is excluding the rescue squads.
excluding the rescue squad.
Make sure you cap your next year at 10,000.
Cap of 10,000.
So
10,000 startup. With minimum required staff. Every year afterward, we're paid by percentage up to $10,000.
percentage of the call.
Yes, percentage of medical calls up to 10,000.
I got a question. When you're saying call volume, so if I've got, just keep it simple, if I get 10 calls, 5 of those are medical, that's going to say 50% of my calls were medical. It's not based on, because I've got 700 people, I've got 3,000 people. You know what I'm saying? Like, how does that work?
So the claims, so looking at claims value, I know you 50 of those were fire related and only 6 fire rescue related and 6 were medical related. So I guess it'd be however EMS, if EMS says, hey, we need a first response, then however dispatch classifies that.
So in that example of what he's saying, your call volume would have, the medical percentages or total call volume would have been 11%,
Right.
which would 11% of 30,000 base level fund is $3,300.
Right. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that right.
So the calculation for the 10,000 is off of the base, the start.
That way they can get it there.
And it's always 1 year prior. So there's never going to be fluctuation in the current year. You're going to base it off the previous year for the current year's allocations.
Correct.
Do you want me to voice a concern I see on your tracking?
What?
Do you want me to voice a concern that I see on your tracking?
Please.
A concern I have on the mayor's office tracking of that through the 911 documents is, for example, Saturday there was a car accident that got cat as a motor vehicle accident. The first responders did CPR for 30 minutes. That's about as first response as you get. So that's where I see a concern with telling 911 cats a call versus it being medical. Because that was cat as a motor vehicle accident. The normal responders responded that would go to
Motor vehicle accident, don't need CPR.
No, but there's a lot that these agencies may get their first on though, that they provide some additional first aid that may be cat as a motor vehicle accident. What's going to come up is, that needs to be addressed now, is if those are going to count as first response calls or motor vehicle accidents. It's the same for falls.
Well, here's the way I look at that.
Yeah.
If I'm a fire department member and I get picked out to a wreck, I better already have some basic training in case I need to do CPR on somebody. I think that's something that should be expected in our fire departments.
Correct.
Okay, so
That's just a tracking concern that I see that I wanted to bring out.
can I clarify one other thing? You said that it wouldn't apply to Churchill Rescue Squad or Hawkins County Rescue Squad. Churchill Rescue Squad already received $10,000 last year. So does that mean we take the $10,000 back?
I think we already said that to them this year, that may not fall this year. If you want to start off with fire departments, or we can start with fire departments. I think if we're going to break it down in our budget document, fire prevention and rescue squad, then we need to take it section by section.
Are we going to do them on a per call basis and tracking too? I mean, this is, to me, it'd be easier to allocate how much money you're going to set for this service a year and then divide it up by how many people you have. If you're only going to do $7,500 worth of supplies this year, $7,500, $5,000 worth, $1,000 worth, whatever that looks like, whatever amount we want to do for this program, and how many, divided by how many people are doing it. Because you're going to cost yourself more money in Eric's time and Jamie's time and people's time. Pulling these numbers.
No, you're not. This is already tracked through E911. The medical, the way it's dispatched out, it's already tracked by E911. There is no, the mayor's office had no reason to be involved in tracking.
So they're all previous years, not futures.
Yes. Because we've already capped it at $10,000. 2 years from now, what if everybody goes over 2,000? We're still only giving $10,000.
Then, of course, it's going to be done on an annual basis, so this whole plan may get blown up during the budget period anyway.
Or if y'all want to spend $40,000, we'll go for $40,000. I'm just looking at a way to try and make it fair for everybody based on last year's call volume. And we're already giving us $30,000 for a fire call, which is paying for something on a percentage of medical costs.
I guess and we're going to relate to this point, but my only hiccup right now, I don't mind the $10,000 startup cost and then use a percentage of your call volume. That's not a bad idea. I go back to what we did last year, and we did give Churchill Rescue Squad $10,000 to get it started. And I believe it was Jeff that said, so that if Hawkins County Rescue Squad becomes EMR certified again, could we qualify for that $10,000? And the answer was yes, you could. I didn't say you would, but yes, you could. So we've already given Churchill Rescue Squad their $10,000 startup fee. We can pull it back this year, but that still leaves Hopkins County Rescue Squad without that startup fee that we granted the Churchill Rescue Squad.
But if we don't have a call volume, then our call volume far exceeds $10,000.
That's true. Then, so are the rescue squads included in your resolution, in your motion?
Maybe make it middle. I want to do fire departments since we're separating this out.
I don't want to give Churchill Rescue Squad a benefit that they aren't. They did a good job doing what they did.
Churchill Rescue Squad, 72% of their calls were medical last year. Hawkins County, 60% of their calls were medical. We're already giving them 30,000 more for the fire department to operate the rescue squad. If we want to do a separate motion for first response for rescue squad, then we can do it, debate it then.
But as of now, your motion is on.
I'll look for the fire department for now.
All right, does anybody else have any questions about?
And the only reason for that, Mr. Chairman, is because that is the primary jobs for those from the rescue squad and the fire department are two different things. And we are supplementing the medical call for the fire department while rescue squad is already the primary backup. And we'll fund them as such. So we can debate rescue squad then.
Did you have a number on your mind, John, for your idea as far as how much divvying it up?
That wouldn't work if we're doing it as a one-time funding of 10,000 and then so on and so on, because that number will have to change depending on the circumstance of who's at what progress.
All right, does anybody have any questions about what we're voting on? So this would be, essentially, you have the list right there. Correct. Can you?
And you said the Holton Defense is
Holton Defense is BAE. So this resolution would allocate $10,000 in addition to whatever their original allocation was, 30, to Carter's Valley, Clinch Valley, Mount Carmel fire departments. And it would allocate to Stanley Valley an amount of money based on how many calls they ran, because they already received the startup calls. And that amount is how much, Robbie?
for Stanley Valley.
For Stanley Valley, how much would they get?
$8,100 based on last year's call. 27% of their 40,000.
That would actually decrease their funding, right?
Decrease their
So the
funding.
40,000 last year, was that the first response included in that 40,000?
That's right.
Yes, that's
So it'd
correct.
be,
38,100.
yeah.
So we're voting on a resolution that's going to allocate $38,100 extra dollars in 2030, because there's 3 more fire departments, and then you're decreasing Stanley Valley by $1,900.
Now, all the fire department certified,
Carter's Valley, Clinch, these are EMS now. So Carter's Valley is, Clinch Valley is, Mount Carmel is, Stanley Valley is, they got their $10,000 last year.
18% of Carter Valley, 30,000, $5,400. That's what they'd get.
No, because they're
Carter's Valley is their first year.
It's their first year.
Okay, first year, so it'd be 10,000. Clinch Valley first year, so it'd be 10,000.
Mr. Chairman, you can go this one more time, the first timers.
Carter's Valley, Clinch Valley, Mount Carmel. Those 3 are just starting as EMR. And then Stanley Valley is continuing the program for a second year, which under this motion would decrease their funding by $1,900 based on the percentage of calls they ran last year. So the total funding for this motion is $38,100.
Versus the 40,000 would be spending on.
And it could decrease over time because we're getting the startup cost behind us.
Correct.
Okay, everybody know what we're voting on?
Does that make more sense?
Yeah, I'm starting to work it out now.
So in this motion, you're wanting to include the Stanley Valley call volume?
Yes.
In this motion?
Yes, because they got the 10,000 startup last year. once again, this was, we said this, we would review it on an annual basis, so I want to make that clear. This is just our annual review. Okay, any other questions?
I don't think we need to be defunding. It's time for that. I don't think we need to be defunding any of the fire departments, period.
Danny, we're not defunding the fire departments. They're getting their base 30,000. This is just fund, how we're gonna fund the medical costs. They're still getting their 30,000.
They're just not going to get the full 10,000 we gave them for the EMR program last year.
Which is based on the percentage of the extra that we've asked them to do.
They're getting paid for the cost of it.
On medical only. That's what the extra 10,000 is.
All right, any other questions? Ms. Sarah, will you call the roll, please?
Nancy Barker,
Yes.
Jason Roach,
Yes.
John Gibson,
No.
Danny Elvis,
No.
Tom Kerr,
Yes.
Joshua Gillum,
Yes.
and Robbie Palmer.
Yes.
5 yes, 2 no, motion carries.
All right, so that was only for the EMR request. Now you have other allocations that they've requested. I don't know if they've included that 10,000 in their requests. So I'll go back to Carter's Valley. They were at the top. They've requested a $25,000 increase. I'm guessing of which 10,000 was for the EMR program.
See, Carter's Valley is on 8.
I'm sorry, on page, you're looking for the request sheet.
Yeah, see.
Page.
Hey, Eric, where it says Churchill Volunteer Fire Department.
It's an old caption.
That's
It's
why.
Rogersville, absolutely.
Okay, I wasn't sure something happened.
Yeah. So the first response, they were asking for $10,000 in addition for that.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll entertain it, I'd like to make a motion that we fund all the remaining fire departments at the same level they were funded at in previous budget year.
Commissioner Gillum. Do we hear a second? Second by Mr. Gibson. Any discussion?
I'm sorry, just a second.
That was Mr. Gibson. And this is to fund all fire departments at the same level as last year, with the exception of the EMR program. All right, Ms. Sarah, do you care to call the roll, please?
Just a second. Joshua Gillum,
Yes.
Robbie Palmer,
Yes.
Danny Elvis,
Yes.
John Gibson,
Yes.
Nancy Barker,
Yes.
Jason Roach.
Yes.
Tom Kerr.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
All right, so that took care of that. I guess we go to rescue squads now.
So I think on your point, Robbie, the point you were making is that Churchill, the rescue squads are already running a lot of medical costs. That's what they're designed to do.
Correct.
So it's not so much them adding that certification. I don't want to say it's not as value added, but it's more in their wheelhouse already versus where fire department's doing it. It's adding another service, correct, different thing.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's the whole point, separating what the primary job is versus what now we're bleeding into. We're already doing this, we just need to figure out the funding behind this. And Jeff, I think you're the only one here in the rescue squad. I didn't get a chance to talk to Corey. What say to you about this? I know Corey had requested 10,000 for EMR.
I agree with what's already precedent's been said. The initial startup, I don't care what organization it is, I think that $10,000 need to be there. I don't think it's fair, as someone said earlier, take that $10,000 away because there's still that initial startup cost. And you look at, like I mentioned a minute ago, call volumes on medical costs. To a certain extent, you are correct. But when you get into the rescue squad, their primary goal set up on them is search and rescue services. it ain't actually the medical side of it. Because times have changed, people's changed and everything else. And on the EMS service, we don't have 12 ambulances running in this county, right? And it's hard for them to keep 5 ambulances running in this county. So to compensate, they've asked for the rescue squads and now the fire departments to help compensate on some of these medical costs to provide a first response area, because we are dealing with people's lives. I agree with me personally, Jeff, the $10,000 startup, and then after that, that's up for you guys to decide. It's in our wheelhouse already, like you said, to provide medical assistance. And at our organization, I don't know about anybody else's, to be a member of our organization, you have to have AED, CPR, basic first aid credentials to be a member of our organization. Along top of being extrication certified and anything else we deem necessary to provide a better service to our community. So, and the way we do it is if you don't maintain those credentials, guess what? You're not a member anymore. So.
All right, would anybody like to?
Shall we make a motion to fund both rescue squads at the $71,000 mark?
Is that 71? I'll second it for discussion.
All right, second for discussion. Motion on the floor to fund both rescue squads at 71,000.
Is that 71,000 we gave them last year? MR?
Yes.
For Churchill. So to make that point, so if we want to use the same criteria for rescue squad, we funded Hawkins County at 61,000 last year. 60% of our call volume was medical calls. So if we fund by percentage with a cap of 10,000, then they're $26,000 underfunded. So that's why I put the cap at 10,000 for EMR. They would get their 10,000, so you're not taking you're giving them the funding for their supplies
For what they ran.
For what they ran.
So if we pass this motion, what you're suggesting is they've already ran enough calls to earn the 10,000 last year anyway.
Correct. And the reason, when I talked to Rescue Squad earlier, that was the reason he said we're already getting funding because we are primary backup.
All right, does anybody have any other questions? Ms. Sarah, will you call the roll, please?
Jason Roach,
Yes.
Joshua Gillum,
Yes.
Tom Kern,
Yes.
John Gibson.
Yes.
Nancy Barker,
Yes.
Danny Elvis,
Yes.
and Robbie Palmer.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Okay, that takes us to other emergency management. Hawkins County E911 asked for $667, an increase for a subscriber fee, I think, if I remember correctly.
Make a motion that we grant the request, grant the budgeted amount as requested for both these line items, Mr. Chairman.
The motion has been made to grant the budget as requested for other emergency management and seconded by Mr. Aldis. Any discussion? Seeing none, you call the roll, please.
Tom Kern,
Yes.
Jason Roach,
Yes.
Robbie Palmer.
Yes.
Joshua Gillum,
Yes.
John Gibson.
Yes.
Danny Elvis,
Yes.
and Nancy Barker.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
All right, so moving on to ambulance service, Hawkins County EMS, they requested an additional $550,000.
Well,
They amended that
I'm sorry.
on the floor the other day when they were here. I think they knocked it down to 700,000, which would be an increase of 300,000.
Increase of 300. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't write that in my book.
Couple of things. It wasn't too many years ago that we were funding the EMS at how much? 60,000? Wasn't they getting the same funding as rescue squads?
At the time, they were getting a little more by getting 60, I think. I think the rescue squad at the time were getting 50, but yeah, I think it was about 61 per EMS.
And that hasn't been too many, I mean, it's not been a decade ago.
No, it was, I think within the last 5, maybe 6, 7 tops, but yeah.
I mean, in 23, 24, they were budgeted $200,000. They ended up getting a $400,000 increase
Thank you.
in 24, 25. And we're looking at a $300,000 increase for 25, 26. So that's $700,000 over the last 2 budget cycles.
In 18, 19, it was at 60,000 while the rescue squads were at 49,000.
So in 6 years, it's increased. If we requested what they have asked, it would be more than 10 times. Is that correct?
That's a correct statement.
So, just so everybody understands who's listening, that's unsustainable. That's not a personal statement against any person or any organization. There is no way that this trend can continue. Something must change. And all options have to be on the table, period. Because we cannot afford that, those types of increases. Anyway, we want to support the EMS. We're going to have an ambulance service in Hawkins County, but all solutions have to be on the table because we cannot. We just can't sustain this. And I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, if you'll entertain it. Absolutely. That we keep their funding at $400,000. For this budget year, and that's my motion, and I would just add for commentary that we would, obviously, if they run into issues as the year goes on, they can come to the budget committee, but there's a lot of variables going on with that organization with the joint venture. I think it's fair that we keep their funding the same and take it month by month from there.
Is there a second? Second. Second by Mr. Gibson. Any further discussion? I mean, he hit it on the head. You can't sustain that much increase year by year and continue on into the future. My question is going to become at what point, and this is not a reflection on anybody at Hawkins County EMS. I want you to understand this is a matter of how county government can fund its services. But at what point do we spend enough on Hawkins County EMS that Hawkins County EMS just becomes a government service anyway?
Sure.
That goes into, if the joint venture doesn't work, are we to the point of asking EMS to turn it over to the county?
And I don't know. I'm not saying that we're there. I'm not saying we're not there. I'm just saying at some point,
all options got to be on the table.
At some point, if we're spending almost $1 million a year, if we were to have granted their request, what would it have cost us just to run it as a county service and buy out their equipment? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not suggesting we do that, but at some point, you're right. You can't increase from, what was it, 61,000?
60, I think.
60,000 in 18, 19? And we're looking at 25, 26 at almost $1 million? That's, yeah, 18, 19. So that is a tremendous amount of increase. Anybody else have any comments? All right, Ms. Sarah, will you call the roll, please?
Danny Elvis,
No.
Joshua Gillum,
No, we'll back up first a minute. So now, we're voting yes, is to leave it at 400,000.
That's right.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's
Yes,
correct.
sir, sorry.
Joshua Gillum,
Yes.
Jason Roach,
Yes.
Nancy Barker,
Yes.
Tom Kern,
Yes.
John Gibson,
Yes.
Robert Palmer.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
All right, so the rest of the contributions will be frozen at last year's request, correct? Or did we pulled Hawkins County Library out of that resolution, if I remember correctly?
The senior citizen will be remain frozen. That last year's budget amount. Correct.
So So nobody in the senior citizen asked for an increase except for Motor Community Association. They asked for a $2,600 increase.
I look in section 7, and then there's a $10,000 request in section 8, which would all be frozen based on the resolution currently. The only question was, would you still vote on number 6 for that 5775 increase? And I think really you would.
Yes, because that one was left out of the resolution. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, can we vote? But we'd have to vote on the, okay, so the Hawken County Library System will get the 5775.
We can vote on that one because they were excluded from the resolution. But 5, 7, and 8 are all frozen where they are for last year, based on the resolution.
I do want to make a suggestion on 7 and 8. So, looking at making cuts, I ran some numbers through. If you cut 20% of all the charitable contributions listed in 7 and 8, you're cutting $31,000 out of the budget. And the numbers that it would be cutting is not substantial enough to put those organizations under. I can go line by line if we want to, or
Mr. Palmer, you said 20% would yield what?
out of the 7 and 8 boxes, $31,420. So the totals for 7 and 8 would be $117,100. 20% cut out of each line item. Well, I figured $31,420.
I think I'm seeing it just a little different.
What's your?
I think you're doing 20% whole.
Because I cut 20%. I cut 20% out of the budget amount from last year.
From 107,100, I got 21,420. I'm getting.
Out of 7, all of 7 and all of 8.
Yeah, 63,720 plus 43,380, 107,100.
That's 17. I got 117,100.
I think you maybe grabbed Men's Society's $10,000 ask for 25, 26. Because they went up 40,000 on ask.
Yes. Yeah, so 21,420. So we could say that also now the 24-25 budgeted amount, or 20% out of 7 and 8 in the 24-25 fiscal year.
I'm seeing 21,420 savings.
Yes.
That's where I'm at. Okay.
Just as a whole, a vote for a whole or individual?
Individual. I'll make that motion, Chairman, to cut 20% of the contributions in boxes 7 and 8 out of the 24, what we funded in 24-25.
Okay. Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll say.
Thank you, Mr. Gillum. Floor is open for discussion.
And looking at these, I think we need to realize some of the services that are being provided. And most of them are operating on a shoestring because they cut them 10,000 several years ago, never reinstated that one, 10% several years ago and never reinstated. So if they were not be able to make ends meet because most of them are operating on a shoestring, I need to keep that in slack because most of these are essential services when you look at some of the stuff that's being provided.
So my answer to that, Barker, is these are nonprofits, and not everybody in the county wants to see their taxpayer dollars go to certain organizations, and they need to be out raising money. And I'm not being mean when I say that, it's just being blunt, that these are not services required, they have to be funded.
The American Red Cross, is that a local chapter that we contribute to? Is that the National Red Cross?
Cross is our first line of defense in disaster management for sheltering and our first line of defense for burnouts.
So as EMA director, are you saying that this is money well spent? In your opinion?
I don't control that organization, but like I said, that's the first phone call we'd make for sheltering needs. So,
Well, but when they shelter in county facilities. So like the
Yeah.
RMS is the county facility that they shelter in if it's.
there's about 50 designated across the county.
So they're not providing the facilities, they're just organizing and managing them.
The manpower, the ADA compliance, all those type of things. And they won't do any, just for clarity, they don't do anything pre-disaster. So anything, if a tornado was being forecast to come through the area, there's nothing pre-disaster. But the moment the disaster happens, they pick up all sheltering needs afterwards. They do that not to move people into harm's way, potentially.
Are there any other questions about the motion?
That 40% is about right figure on it. That can be amended, that can be changed.
Well, remember, this is the first draft as well. Historically, and I appreciate how we're doing this right now. Historically, we have added contribution requests for calculation purposes. I think we're doing the right thing by jumping ahead and let's go ahead and getting into the work right now. So yeah, this is first draft, so you'll have a chance to amend it again. Just presenting the second draft, correct?
Absolutely.
All right,
It's not final until it passes commission.
any other questions? Ms. Sarah, will you call the roll, please?
Danny Alves,
No.
John Gibson,
No.
Robbie Palmer,
Yes.
Joshua Gillum,
Yes.
Tom Kern,
No.
Jason Roach,
Yes.
and Nancy Barker.
No.
4 no, motion fails.
So let's go back to the drawing board then. The Hawkins County Library System, they have requested $5,775 in addition. And we did exempt them from the resolution where we froze nonprofits. So would anybody like to address that?
I want to declare a conflict of interest. Mr. Chairman, I serve on that Hawkins County Library Board.
Thank you.
So I'll be abstaining from this conversation.
Commissioner Jones, that you serve on there, do you know what that 775 is?
So I was not there when they actually put together that request. I do know that they do lots of things for that community and those kind of things. I mean, they do good programs. But I'm not going to take a stance on it anyway, just to be honest with you. I don't think that'd be good for me to do.
Tell us how many libraries does that serve?
It's Rogersville, Scornsville, Churchill.
So three libraries. Mr. Chairman, why should we send that through at last year's funding?
Mr. Gibson has made a motion to fund the Hawkins County Library System at last year's funding. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Palmer. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Sarah, will you call the roll, please?
Tom Kern,
Yes.
Robbie Palmer,
Yes.
Danny Alves,
Yes.
John Gibson,
Yes.
Jason Roach,
Yes.
Nancy Barker,
Yes.
and Joshua Gillum.
Abstain.
6 yes, 1 abstain, motion carries.
All right, so I guess that takes us to a list of contracts and contributions within offices, the Hawkins County General Fund. It's on page number 3. Beginning with the First Tennessee Development District. So, it doesn't look like anybody's requested any additional funding except for the First Tennessee Development District. And this is still considered contribution, so.
Well, it's contributions with contracts, and that's the price if you want to be part of that service, and that's for planning. They're probably speaking up better than I can, but they provide an employee that comes down and helps lead those planning meetings, correct? So,
He's handy. Connor is who you're referring to?
yes.
Right. He's very, I will say, he's very available. I've contacted him, email, phone, every which way, just for different real estate things that I've had to deal with, and he's very accessible.
So this is the price his contract went up to service.
Yes, and I don't know why it's not on page 3 there, but the section 3 Tissue Forensic Center, I had in there, the actual budget document, a 5% estimate. But we do not have that figure yet. They're not having the contract pushed out to us yet. Bear with me just a minute, I'll get you that actual figure. $143,730.
I mean,
$143,730. And like I said, that's the absolute estimate. So that's a 5% estimate, which would make that a $6,844 increase over last year.
Well, so I guess, how do you want to proceed with number 1, contracts with government services? This is planning and zoning, first city development district. How does the committee want to proceed there?
Mr. Chairman, do you require anything else from Coos Valley Fire Department?
Thank you. All right, so Mr. Gibson has made the motion to approve the $1,024 increase. Ms. Barker has seconded that motion. Roll number 1. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Sarah, will you call the roll, please?
Robbie Palmer.
Yes.
Tom Kern.
Yes.
John Gibson.
Yes.
Joshua Gillum.
Yes.
Nancy Barker.
Yes.
Danny Ellis. And Jason Rhodes.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
All right, so I need to excuse myself. I'm going to turn over to Vice Chair.
Right. So I guess that leads us to section 2. So the only other increase we have to consider is box 3.
Correct.
Number 3.
Yep.
So would anyone want to make a motion to combine 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11? Or I guess maybe it's supposed to be 10.
Let's call it 10.
Okay, yeah. Since they're not asking for increases.
I'll make a motion to combine them.
Second.
All right. We've got a motion by Commissioner Palmer and a second by Commissioner Gibson to pass sections 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 at previous year's funding. Is there any discussion on any of this? If not, Ms. Sarah, will you call the roll, please?
John Gibson.
Yes.
Joshua Gillum.
Yes.
Robbie Palmer.
Yes.
Danny Ellis.
Yes.
Tom Kern.
Yes.
Nancy Barker.
Yes.
Do I need to wait on Jason?
Yeah, he's having it anyway.
Yeah.
Jason stepped out of the room, so we have 6 yes, motion carries.
All right. Did you give a figure while I was out of room on the increase for forensics?
It is a 5% estimated figure, which is $143,730, which is an increase of $6,844. But again, it was just an estimate placeholder. They did not have the new contract available.
You said 6,844.
Correct.
Okay. And remind everyone what they do for us.
It's e-tissue forensic service. The alternative is Knoxville. In the past, they've been pretty comparable in price. I think the complaint was that the travel cost would be higher, if I remember the prior conversation correctly.
Gotcha. Okay. got a motion for Commissioner Gibson to grant the $6,844 estimated increase, seconded by Commissioner Palmer. Any discussion? Not, Ms. Sarah, call the roll, please.
Nancy Parker.
Yes.
John Gibson.
Yes.
Danny Elvis.
Yes.
Robbie Palmer.
Yes.
Rusher Hill.
Yes.
Tom Kerr. And Jason Burch is out of the room. We have 6 yes, motion carries.
Okay. That is all on contributions for now, right? So that would lead us to regular budget documents to start at general fund.
Wherever you guys would like to go next. We have general fund solid waste COLAs, we have new requests, and then we have just funds that are unhealthy as they are, so.
How about the Commissioner Alba suggested it's probably a good idea before we get into this without the chairman here. I'm going to take a 5-minute break. Okay, everybody be back in here at 2:25. A little more than 5 minutes. Start back, and I'll give the chair back to Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. All right, so I guess we'll jump head first into the thick of our budget. And we'll begin with 101. Is that okay with everyone? General Fund 101? That's the elephant in the room, I guess. No, that's not actually highway issues.
Dan, I think he called you enough.
Actually, since Danny's here, if it's okay, let's go ahead and start with highway because he's here, so that way we can get finished and move him on. We'll hold him all day. So we will start with highway. Okay, Eric, do you care to remind us how much money we need to make up in this budget for it to be accepted by the Comptroller's Office?
We need to bring ending fund balance back to $1,520,556. So we are currently $1,053,701 short as presented. Now, I do want to clarify that Mr. Jones did resubmit another version, and we have staff able to key that just before this started. And I've had a chance to review it, but it does look like the new version does change those figures. Of course, you all don't have that version in front of you, but as presented, a resubmission has us ending with 882,353. Ending fund balance on the new version is $882,353. So the difference on that would still be $638,203 if you all liked the new version as presented. The new version, $638,203 will be our new gap to close if you all liked his new version that you do not have yet in front of you. His new version did not have my recommendation, which was, I think, about 170-some thousand. Bear with me, I'll try to figure that out. $73,500. So if you all like that, and you don't have to, but if you do, and we move that over to highway capital projects, we're looking more at 464,703, which
What was the 173, where's that money come from?
that would be moving everything except for the grant that has already started out of capital projects into highway capital projects, to take capital expenditures out of the operating budget and put it into Fund 176. And so if we followed all those ifs, you're looking at 3.8 pennies to close that difference.
And that's not including that 175, not including that 2 cents that we had found elsewhere already, correct? I know in the first draft we talked about the debt that had been retired.
1 penny in general debt service, which you all can leave it wherever you want. I would highly recommend you either move it to a general capital projects fund or leave it in debt service. But yes, there was 1 penny. I don't recall where the other floating penny was that you referenced.
Education debt that had been retired.
Education debt service is showing a surplus. There are pennies there, but I would caution on getting in a hurry to move those until you hear the school's presentation. I may be correct. They may say sure. I doubt that, but I would wait personally to hear their needs, their education capital project needs before moving theirs, because I make the same recommendation. If you have surplus pennies in an education debt service fund, the best place to move those pennies would be education capital projects fund. Yeah, so 3.8 cents would close up that remaining difference with all those other variables to get us back to where that 20% ending fund balance is. I still don't love it. I still wouldn't say this thing is fixed forevermore, but if that was the goal, was to get the ending fund balance back to 20% this year, those changes would make it.
Coming up 170.
173,500. That would be moving everything out of his 68,000 capital outlay budget over to Fund 176 Highway Capital Projects, except line 799, because that grant has already started. Had it not, I would recommend moving it to. But it's already in progress, and last time we had a split funding project, it was a nightmare for us, purchasing, audit, all. So I would recommend that you go along and let it close out.
He did have a bring down 464,703.
Yeah, correct. And to get to 20% ending fund balance, that still doesn't close your gap up as far as revenue versus expenditures to 0. That just gets you back to the 20%. So we still would potentially be having an awkward conversation again next year regarding highways still slipping in the wrong direction. But the question was how to get back to 20%. So I've answered it as such for 20% fund balance.
With the exception of the 464,703 that we have to come up with.
Correct.
They'll come up 464,703 before we get it.
So we need to get, that's how we need to get it to 0 to 20%, and that just gets it passed by the skin of our teeth. And in the new presentation, Danny, did you decrease your other contracted services at all?
My new presentation is exactly what I was allotted last year, except for the raises for the pay. I removed the 4 laborers I was asking for. I cut materials and supplies to last year's total. And just be pre-warned, I'm moving money to make out the rest of this year on last year's budget. So services are going to have to be cut. That wasn't what I was elected to do. I was elected to fix these roads, but if I can't get the money to do it, we just have to go idle mode for 2 months.
Do we have Greg, the same thing. So you might have any idea where that money's gonna go.
I don't have 500,000.
So
yet.
that's been pushed through by the General Assembly, but the final rules on that's not came through yet.
Part of the wording said general expenses, but then it went on to give more wording that said costs associated with cleaning remediation.
The
So
figure-
what does that mean in English?
It means we don't have a clue right now.
Okay.
You know, in
Because that was gonna release it in July, correct?
October is the date that I see, by October.
For this conversation, I would say we'd almost be best suited ignoring that. We don't know where that's going to land, what it's going to look like, where it goes, what it's covered. So I would caution using that to balance anything.
And that's a one-time.
It is a one-time, so it's not a recurrent solution of any sort.
So, for some of the paving and things that Danny's got planned in his budget, is there a chance that we could pull from some of that highway capital projects as it's built later into the year? Like we could budget some on the front end out of whatever pennies we give him, but then on the back end, use some of that highway capital project money the second half of the year.
We are projecting it to grow at a pretty nice rate. But that being said, it does take time for money to accumulate. We still have this month pending a second reading of the wheel tax. Assuming that passes, we are showing an estimated ending balance in 25-26 of 807,683. However, that would be reduced if you all go with the moving of his capital outlay into that and fund him at the same levels, which I'm assuming for the sake of argument you would. A lot of moving pieces, but that ending fund balance then we change down to 634,183. So yes, although you would have to then put that into the budget, there's no standing line there, but there would be a place for you to go to add some additional, whatever it was, project you decided you wanted to do with paving equipment.
I guess in later in the year, when we allow that to build up, we can't budget for it now, we don't have money. But he could come to us and ask for a budget amendment. Could we move it over?
You can do it either way. I actually have to watch cash flow because I can't let money go before it's been accumulated. Sure. Of course, with $244,580 property tax, the majority of that will not come until February. The wheel tax is at least a more evenly distributed revenue. But yeah, you can't spend it until we get it. So even if you allocated it now in this current budget cycle, I may be holding them up for cash flow purposes until there's enough money to support it.
Mr. Chairman, I would look I would try not to take money out of the capital project and balance the budget before 64. And I've been hard on Danny. Me and Danny's had several honest discussions, and his equipment and supplies, what it costs right now to get anything, I think we're going to be able to again in our capital project for highway. I would caution people money out of their budget. And with that being said, I would assume if you get, I know this is costing a lot now to get roads back in the shape they need to be. As you do this, we should see some of those costs coming down. In theory, right?
In theory, but it's gonna take years. So I just scratch the surface of stuff that needs to be done. We're making progress, but some areas are better and some, as we're working in the other areas, get worse.
Well, and, all options are on the table, kind of like with the EMS earlier. I guess I'm just looking at what can we do to close that gap without having to increase revenue. So if we decided to dip into highway capital projects later in the year, it looks like we wouldn't be dipping in a tremendous amount. It's going to have time to resupply itself. Once again, we're putting a Band-Aid on a problem that we're going to still have to address in the coming years. We also have, we already have a tax allocation that we could play with. We could move pennies around if we need to. But if you move pennies out of general fund, you're going to cut into what you're putting in your undesignated fund balance, but our undesignated fund balance right now sits at twice of what it's healthy, but I caution that. I always caution that, because if you pull from that allocation, you've got to replace it. So we're looking at, I swear I'm stepping on my own toes. I'm looking at passing a budget for this year, and I'm not thinking ahead. That's what I'm suggesting, because that's the bottom line. I'm looking at fixing a problem for this year. Oh, this is my work. Oh, you're talking about number 9.
Any pennies we put into this fund, there's a maintenance of effort behind that too. Is that correct? Is there a maintenance?
Highway fund, operating fund, yes. There's a 5-year average on his local revenues. So if your current allocation drops below 5-year average, you'll be penalized by the equal amount in state gas tax.
So if we, let's say for argument's sake, we move a couple pennies over from general to highway,
You're not getting it back.
we're not getting it back.
I mean, it's not that cut and dry. It's a calculation that we ran every year.
We need to assume that.
But you need to assume you're not getting them back.
Eric, looking at how our dollars are broken down, is there anywhere that maybe a penny could be moved from here, from there, or even a fraction of a penny?
Legally, yes. I would argue no, but legally, yes. But as he alluded to, you're going to put a very small Band-Aid on a growing problem, and you're going to, what's the saying, rock, paper, to pay Paul? And you all, or whoever is sitting in this room next year, is going to have to fix what wasn't really fixed properly.
Well, I would say, I mean, and I hear the word properly. But we're coming off of a 22 cent something tax increase last year. But we also have to look back at our taxpayers and say, we need more money. So your definition of property may not be their definition of property.
I understand. I was one of those taxpayers. I paid a large tax bill.
I would tend to agree with Chairman that even now, yes, fixing problems long term, get to the root of it is what we want to do. However, the general fund is healthier, right, than this fund, certainly. And if you're doing something to avoid asking more money, even if you put it off for a year or 2 years, that means something to taxpayers, right? And as long as we understand that's what we were having to do. But yeah, I would tend to agree that whatever.
Jason Lippow comes up and says no. That's what we did before. We borrowed and borrowed the general fund, and next thing we know, we have to stay up here saying, you're not going to borrow from it anymore, and you either get it back where it needs to be, or we're going to shut you down. So that's where we come up with the other wheel tax.
No.
So we robbed Peter to pay Paul, and ended up paying Paul more.
And the comment I'd make is you're right, the general fund is definitely in healthier shape than the highway fund. But I would argue that it needs to be, because you're talking about annual expenditures in the highway fund of estimated $7.6 million. You're talking about annual expenditures in the general fund of over $25.5 million. So yes, it is a healthier fund. It needs to be.
All right, Eric, follow me with this. Solid waste is one of our healthier fund balance.
Correct.
Looks like we average 3 million expenditures yearly, which would leave us basically $1 million left in that account. I know we already capped it at 300,000, is that correct? Going into it, and we roll it over into
The local option sales tax, we capped it at 1.8 million. And then we sent anything above that over to our general capital projects fund. And I know y'all probably get sick of hearing me say this, but I would also recommend being very cautious to pull any revenue away from the capital projects fund. because you'll have asked, how do we reduce debt? How do we stay ahead of needing to issue debt? And feeding capital projects funds is how we stay out of debt.
Is there any excess, and can we pull any more out of solid waste? Without getting that?
Lower the cap. I mean, it's, it's only projected 131 to the red. It probably won't really land that way when the dust settles.
But not enough.
I don't know that you could lower it enough to really make a very substantial difference in the general fund and or highway. I'm not sure where you're recommending to redirect it to.
And that's a fair point. I mean, if you directed another, you're trying to make up $460,000 if you, even if you took, I don't know if half of that is too much to take out of there. But I mean, if it, say you took $250,000 from general fund, from solid waste into here, and that solves half your problem.
Yeah, and our current project is coming out of this year, or last year's budget, well, the 24-25 budget, and not 25-26.
You're gonna have to reoccur, you're gonna have to keep doing that every year, and how much else? Doesn't you have to maintenance it up once you do it?
I would not, we're only doing one convenience center right now, so. That's why I'm asking, like, what, just like Jason said, all options are remaining.
For reference, the 23-24 fiscal year in solid waste, we only put $25,000 into fund balance. So, yes, we did buy the land that year, but I don't know, when you're talking about 250, if we start going up to numbers that high, I don't know if solid waste stays as one of our healthier funds.
Right. Again, Robin, figure to pay fund.
Exactly.
And that's why I was asking, like, where are we falling, but you answered that question. What's our current deficit right now here?
In highway,
No, the total budget, 2 point.
I don't have a figure on the total budget. If you want the general fund, I think it's 2.9, bear with me. 2.844,271, $2,844,271.
So 2.9.
Close enough, you might as well say 2.9.
And that's included in the, and that includes the 464,000 that we need to make up.
No, I just gave you a general fund deficit. The 464, you're trying to make up the highway fund.
Well, so far, we're gonna have to find,
Did we get a resubmitted highway fund?
No, I just got it handed back to me 5 minutes before this meeting started.
Could we get a copy of that?
You absolutely can,
No, we're gonna get it for you, Eric.
please. The new expenditures over revenues on that version is still 1.197365. Nine, probably. So again, when we got down to that 464,703 figure, that was assuming moving the capital projects, using the newly submitted version, and just trying to get back to CTAS recommended 20%.
How much are we putting into, how many pennies are we putting into the highway capital projects? Now, is it 2?
I believe that's the current figure. Yep, 2 cents. the Highway Capital Projects Fund as presented has 2 cents of property tax as well as the proposed bill tax revision of the original 1/3 going in there. So you've got 2 funding sources for the Highway Capital Projects Fund currently.
If we make those an even 52, 32, and 24 cents,
They have their own very complex calculation that needs to be tested against their ADAs and ADMs to see if there's any pennies available.
So this is literally your same budget as previous year, just with employee raises.
Exactly.
So you kind of go along with the COLA raise, 2.9 for the employees.
Our raises is just over 30 cents across the board. I averaged the high wage earner with the low wage earner. And it came out to about 38 cents, so I don't know what except for the supervisors, the 2 supervisors, I'd like to get $1 for them because they got to deal with the public.
new proposal in for calculation purposes, and then just work on it when we get the next draft.
Well, I would say on expenditure, this is probably about what the commission will get. And if you cut him down less than he had last year, that would probably be difficult to do. So I'll make the motion that we accept his revised budget for purpose of the second draft.
Second by Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Davis, will you call the roll?
John Gibson.
Yes.
Joshua Gill.
Yes.
Nancy Barker. Danny Elvis.
Yes.
Robbie Palmer.
Yes.
Jason Rhodes.
Yes.
And Tom Meyer.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we will stand in recess for our work on the budget. We can take about a 5-minute break if you'd like, and then we'll begin our regular scheduled budget committee meeting at 3 o'clock.